You answer the messages. You keep the appointments. You remember what must be remembered, complete what must be completed, and offer the familiar reply when someone asks how you are. From the outside, the structure holds. Nothing obvious has broken, yet the ambitions that once drew you forward now seem to belong to someone you used to understand. The routines continue, but their meaning has grown faint. The roles still fit your life, though they no longer fit the person living it. This can be difficult to explain precisely because there may be no visible catastrophe to point toward. Others see continuity, a full calendar, responsibilities met, relationships maintained, a life that appears coherent. Privately, you may feel like a guest moving through your own days. The calendar remains full, but the one carrying it no longer knows why. With that estrangement may come fear, anxiety, loneliness, even the burden of wondering whether you are ungrateful for a life you once worked hard to build. You may try to recover your former enthusiasm, tighten your discipline, or remind yourself of everything that remains intact. Sometimes this helps. Sometimes it only reveals how distant the old source of direction has become. That distance proves nothing by itself. It does not automatically mean you are entering a profound transformation. It does not tell us whether you are depleted, depressed, overwhelmed, unsafe, grieving, or approaching a developmental threshold. Suffering should not be turned into a symbol before its concrete needs are respected, and yet it should not always be dismissed as failure merely because its meaning is not immediately clear. Here is the quieter possibility. A life can remain intact after the identity that organized it has begun to lose authority. What once provided shape, protection, and purpose may still function outwardly while no longer commanding inward consent. The old map has not vanished. You simply cannot pretend it is the whole landscape. So the task ahead is not to announce a breakdown or crown a rebirth. It is to remain attentive. We will ask what has lost authority, what the present suffering requires in the way of care, and how you might participate through modest, reversible steps before certainty arrives. Patient discernment must come before any dramatic conclusion. But first we must look at the part of the personality that built this workable life, the useful face that learned how to belong, achieve, and endure. What made it strong, and why might that former strength now feel like a confinement? The structure that organized those former ambitions has a name, the persona. In plain language, it is the identity through which you meet the visible world, the manner in which you approach work, family, duty, and social expectation. It tells others what they may rely upon. It also tells you how to secure a place among them. There is nothing inherently false about this identity. It may have helped you become capable when uncertainty felt dangerous, agreeable when belonging was fragile, composed when others depended on your steadiness. Through it, you may have earned trust, recognition, safety, or the first stable ground you had ever known. Its discipline was real. Its sacrifices were real. The life built through it was real. Think of a well-made garment prepared for a particular season. It shelters the body, permits movement, and makes difficult weather bearable. Because it served so faithfully, you keep wearing it after the climate has changed. Only gradually do you notice the tightness across the shoulders, the shortened reach, the effort required for every breath. The garment has not become wicked, nor was wearing it a mistake. It has simply ceased to accommodate the life now moving inside it. The difficulty begins when a role that solved a real problem is mistaken for the whole personality. The achiever learns that value follows accomplishment. The caretaker discovers that closeness is easiest when personal needs remain quiet. The reliable one becomes indispensable by never appearing uncertain. The peacemaker protects connection by absorbing conflicts that belong to everyone. The expert receives respect for knowing, then finds there is nowhere to place bewilderment. Each role may be admirable. Each may also become too narrow. Approval and repetition strengthen the identification. What you do well is requested again. What others reward is practiced until it feels like character itself. Meanwhile, qualities that complicate the accepted image may remain undeveloped or unseen. Anger beneath patience, play beneath discipline, dependence beneath competence, desire beneath service, uncertainty beneath expertise. Their exclusion does not prove that the visible identity was fraudulent. It means the adaptation could represent only part of you. This is why its weakening can bring shame. You may believe that questioning the role betrays everyone who trusted it, or invalidates the years devoted to becoming it. But changed conditions within you do not rewrite those years as deception. A sincere identity can complete its purpose. A necessary strength can reach its limit. The mask becomes imprisoning only when it is asked to contain the entire person rather than serve a living relationship with the world. So ask gently, which qualities were welcomed and which had to wait outside? What became strong because life required it? What remained buried because there was no permission, language, or room? Such questions create distance without contempt. Yet when the familiar covering loosens, relief is not the only feeling. There is also exposure. The old identity no longer speaks with full authority, while the deeper orientation has not yet found a name. You are left in the uncertain space between them. This interval can feel like a corridor after you have stepped away from a familiar room. Behind you, its furniture remains visible. The duties you know how to perform, the explanations you have given, the ambitions that once arranged the day. Ahead, another door has not opened. There are no signs telling you how long the passage will be. The temptation is either to run backward and resume the old certainty, or to force an entrance into whatever identity promises immediate relief. Yet the threshold is not the identity waiting on the other side. It is the honest interval itself, the period in which the former center has weakened, while another orientation cannot yet be named without being manufactured. Old motivations may fall silent before new values become articulate. That silence creates room for attention, but it does not issue instructions. It does not tell you to abandon a relationship, leave a vocation, reverse every commitment, or become the opposite of the person you have been. Individuation, in this sense, is not the dramatic discovery of a flawless hidden self. It may be understood as a movement toward a more inclusive life, a growing relationship among qualities that consciousness welcomed, qualities it neglected, and realities that neither side can simply overrule. The aim is not perfection. It is greater participation in the breadth and contradiction of one's personality, so that no single role must speak for the whole. When conscious priorities have become narrow, the unconscious may appear active and even compensatory. What has been ignored can press for recognition. What has been overvalued can be questioned by an opposing feeling, image, resistance, or desire. But compensation is not the same as command. An inner reaction may reveal an imbalance without providing a trustworthy remedy. The neglected voice deserves a hearing, not automatic control. This is why different forms of inner material must remain distinct. A complex may gather emotion around an old wound or recurring relationship pattern. A dream may portray the present attitude in symbolic form. A persistent mood may expose the cost of how life is currently organized. A coincidence that feels meaningful may invite reflection. These are areas of inquiry, not interchangeable evidence that destiny has announced a verdict. Their value lies first in the questions they deepen. What keeps returning? What becomes louder when urgency settles? What does the present attitude permit? And what can it no longer contain? Remaining in the corridor, then, is not passivity. You continue meeting reality. You care for the body, honor necessary obligations, seek support where suffering requires it, and observe what repeatedly asks for attention. You resist both numb retreat and theatrical reinvention. Gradually, a direction may become legible through patterns that endure examination rather than impulses that merely intensify under pressure. The corridor may mark a developmental passage, but that meaning is not guaranteed by discomfort alone. It must survive time, concrete care, and honest scrutiny. Before darkness is interpreted as a doorway, we must ask a more sobering question. What if it signals depletion, depression, overwhelm, grief, illness, or danger? And what help would then be required? The answer may be rest. It may be treatment, protection, grief allowed its proper time, or conditions that must concretely change. Suffering does not become sacred because it can be described symbolically, and crisis carries no guarantee of growth. A compelling interpretation can still be the wrong response to an immediate need. Consider depletion. When prolonged demands have exceeded available strength, emptiness may reflect neglected limits rather than the withdrawal of allegiance from an identity. The needed response may include sleep, reduced demands, a changed workload, practical assistance, or the honest admission that present expectations cannot be sustained. This is not a diagnostic formula. It is a reminder that the body and circumstances must be consulted before exhaustion is assigned a grand meaning. The same restraint matters when distress is persistent, severe, impairing, or unsafe. If you are struggling to function, unable to care for basic needs, frightened by what you might do, or in danger from someone else, interpretation is not enough. Qualified medical or mental health care, trusted human contact, and immediate protective support may be necessary. No symbolic account should persuade you to endure preventable harm alone. The search for meaning must never become an excuse for withholding help. Yet care and transformation are not rivals. Receiving treatment does not disprove an identity crisis. Changing harmful conditions does not make deeper questions irrelevant. Depression, exhaustion, grief, illness, overwhelm, and developmental change do not always arrive in separate compartments. They may overlap, each requiring its own kind of attention. Practical care can reduce the noise surrounding an inner conflict, making it easier to discover what remains when suffering is no longer being intensified by neglect. This gives us a more trustworthy way to inquire. What changes after rest, support, honest conversation, and reduced pressure? What remains when urgency settles? Does the estrangement return steadily, or does it rise chiefly when the nervous system is overburdened? Is the proposed action reversible? Does it increase your capacity to meet reality, or merely promise escape from pain? These questions do not produce instant certainty. They slow the movement from feeling to verdict. A sustained loss of allegiance to an old role is not the same as an acute urge to destroy everything associated with it. One may unfold quietly across time, surviving better sleep, greater support, and careful reflection. The other may demand immediate rupture. Resign now, sever the bond, discard the obligation, prove the change through one irreversible gesture. Intensity can feel like truth because it silences ambiguity. But relief from ambiguity is not yet evidence of direction. When safety permits, delay decisions that cannot easily be repaired. Stabilize basic care. Gather perspective from people able to respond without either dismissing your experience or inflaming it. Test emerging values through limited actions whose consequences you can observe. A credible passage can tolerate patience. It need not threaten catastrophe if you refuse to obey it today. This is the balance. Do not pathologize every uncertainty, and do not romanticize every collapse. Transformation remains a possibility, not a diagnosis. Any interpretation worthy of trust must make room for limits, evidence, assistance, and the possibility that the first faithful act is simply to receive care. Then, when urgent suffering has been met rather than mythologized, another question can be heard more clearly. What feeling, capacity, grief, or contradiction continues to return not as an order to overturn your life, but as a neglected claim asking to participate in it? What remains may not arrive in a noble or recognizable form. It may appear as irritation, where you expected patience, need, where you valued independence, hesitation, where you built your worth upon competence. This is one way to understand the shadow without turning it into something mysterious. It includes qualities, emotions, needs, and capacities that the conscious identity could not comfortably claim. The shadow is not a pure buried self waiting to replace the visible one. It contains no guaranteed wisdom. What was excluded may include anger, dependency, ambition, tenderness, creativity, limitation, or the capacity to say no. Some of it remained undeveloped because it threatened belonging. Some was rejected because it contradicted the role through which you received approval. And some may be difficult, precisely because it carries both a legitimate need and an immature way of expressing it. Imagine the reliable family peacemaker. For years, this person anticipates tension, softens difficult conversations, and keeps everyone connected. The role brings affection and a sense of usefulness. But anger has no accepted place within it. Eventually, that anger may appear indirectly as withdrawal, private resentment, emotional numbness, or fantasies of saying everything at once and walking away. The anger does not automatically mean the family must be confronted without restraint, nor does its inconvenience make it meaningless. It may be carrying information. Too much has been absorbed, certain boundaries have gone unspoken, Closeness has depended upon one person disappearing from the conflict. The responsible question is not, how do I release everything I feel? It is, what does this feeling know about the life I have been unwilling to acknowledge? Emotionally charged patterns may gather around old injuries, recurring fears, or familiar relationships. These complexes can temporarily narrow perception and make the present feel governed by the past. They deserve inquiry, but they are neither supernatural authorities nor excuses for conduct. To recognize that a pattern has seized you is not to surrender responsibility. It is to create enough distance to ask what activated it, what it protects, and what response belongs to the present rather than to an earlier wound. Here, the compensatory possibility of the unconscious becomes practical. Ask what the conscious life has valued so exclusively that an opposing quality now demands attention. If usefulness became the only permitted basis of love, perhaps need returns with unusual force. If control became the highest virtue, spontaneity may appear first as disruptive fantasy. If harmony was preserved at every cost, disagreement may begin to carry the energy of life itself. But integration is not discharge. Anger may need a boundary rather than an explosion. Dependency may need honest support rather than helpless surrender. Ambition may need acknowledgement without domination. Tenderness may require expression that respects another person's freedom. The task is to hear the excluded material, translate the need within it, and choose a form that does not injure yourself or others. And there is grief here. Releasing an identity means mourning not only its limits, but its rewards. The recognition it earned, the relationships organized around it, the certainty it supplied, the future you imagined while inhabiting it. No larger life is formed by pretending this loss does not matter. Once these disowned claims are allowed to speak, the inner world may grow more vivid through moods, dreams, images, and striking coincidences. Then, another discipline becomes necessary. How do you listen closely without mistaking every symbol, impulse, or pattern for an instruction? Responsible listening begins by refusing to make unlike experiences prove the same conclusion. A complex is an emotionally charged pattern shaped by earlier wounds and relationships. A dream is an image produced in sleep. A mood is a sustained atmosphere that may color perception. A striking coincidence is an event in waking life that feels personally significant. Each may deserve attention, but one cannot confirm the meaning of another simply because they appear together. None, by itself, establishes what you should do. Suppose you dream of missing a train. The image may linger with unusual force, yet there is no fixed interpretation hidden inside it. For one person, the train may evoke pressure and the fear of falling behind. For another, it may recall regret over an opportunity not taken. For another, the important detail may be relief as the train departs, suggesting that the expected destination was never freely chosen. The useful question is not, what does a missed train always mean? It is, what did this particular image awaken in me, and where does that feeling appear in my present life? This preserves the dream's symbolic value without converting it into prediction. The dream may reveal conflict in your present attitude. It does not announce that failure is coming, that an opportunity must be seized, or that a decision has already been made somewhere beyond your awareness. It opens inquiry. It does not close judgment. The same restraint belongs to meaningful coincidence. An unexpected meeting, repeated phrase, or timely event may feel as though outer circumstance has touched an inner concern. You need not mock that feeling. It may become an occasion to pause and reflect, but significance is not authority. No coincidence overrides evidence, another person's consent, existing obligations, or considerations of safety. Mystery may deepen attention, but it cannot be required to carry more proof than it possesses. A modest discipline can help. First, record what actually occurred, separating observation from interpretation. Then notice the emotion, bodily response, memory, and personal association it stirred. Finally, test possible meanings against waking reality over time. Does the pattern recur after urgency has passed? Does the interpretation remain plausible when discussed with someone trustworthy? Does it illuminate a conflict already visible in conduct, or does it depend upon ignoring contrary evidence? Ask also what kind of person the interpretation invites you to become. Does it increase humility, responsibility, and contact with life? Or does it inflate certainty, grant exemption from ordinary limits, and make disagreement seem like proof that others cannot understand your special direction? An emerging orientation usually becomes more credible as it survives examination. It need not protect itself from questions. A symbol can open a question without closing a decision. The inner world may enter the conversation, but it does not chair the meeting. What matters is not the brilliance of an isolated sign, but the pattern that remains through time, care, relationship, and consequence. And to observe such a pattern, you need more than insight. You need a daily life steady enough to hold uncertainty without forcing it to speak too soon. Steadiness does not require certainty, it requires a vessel, a form with enough strength to keep uncertainty from spreading into every hour, every relationship, every decision. Without such boundaries, the unanswered question can spill into rumination, impulsive action, or an endless search for interpretations. Then not knowing ceases to be an interval you inhabit and becomes an atmosphere that consumes the whole day. The vessel begins with ordinary anchors. Sleep when you can, eat with some regularity, move the body, keep necessary appointments, attend to financial realities, remain in contact with trustworthy people. These practices are not a cure for every form of suffering, nor do they settle the deeper question. They preserve the conditions under which you can continue asking it without losing contact with the life that must still be lived. Qualified support may belong within that structure. So may conversations with people who can remain near uncertainty without declaring either catastrophe or revelation. You need companions capable of saying, in effect, something important may be happening, and we do not yet know exactly what it means. Such company reduces the pressure to defend a dramatic conclusion merely to feel understood. A brief written dialogue can also give the inner conflict form. Let the established role speak first. What am I protecting? What do I fear will happen if I loosen? Then let the excluded need answer. What have I been denied? What form of participation am I asking for? Finally, write from an observing voice that can hear both without surrendering to either. What responsibility belongs to today? What remains uncertain? What can be tried without pretending the whole future has been decided? Do not demand brilliance from this exercise. Return to it briefly and regularly. Its value lies less in any single answer than in what repeats. Track recurring energies across different settings. What repeatedly enlivens you after the initial excitement fades? What drains you even when circumstances are favorable? What reliably evokes anger, grief, relief, or a sense of inward consent? An isolated mood may reflect fatigue, conflict, fear, or passing circumstance. A pattern that reappears across time and context deserves closer attention. Even then, it offers evidence for inquiry, not a verdict. During this interval, let reversibility govern action. Prefer the conversation that can be revisited, the limited commitment that can be evaluated, the boundary that can be adjusted, the experiment whose consequences can be observed. Postpone unnecessary declarations that make uncertainty harder to examine because your public identity now depends upon defending them. The threshold is crossed through sustained attention and bounded action, not a single moment of certainty. This also gives discipline a different purpose. Discipline is no longer the force used to restore the former persona to power. It protects sleep, care, reflection, relationship, and the quiet in which another direction may become perceptible. It keeps inquiry from being seized by urgency. Patience, however, is not neglect. Bills still come due. Others still have rights and needs. Health, safety, work, and family may require decisions before inward clarity is complete. When reality sets a deadline, decide from the best evidence available, seek counsel where needed, and choose the least harmful, responsible course. Ambiguity grants no exemption from consequence. Once uncertainty has a vessel, waiting becomes participation, and that vessel can now become something more, a place where emerging values are tested through small acts, allowing lived experience, not fantasy alone, to answer what kind of life is trying to take form. The first experiments belong where life is already asking something of you. They do not require a new name, they require contact. A value that exists only in imagination can seem pure because it has met no resistance. Once expressed in work, family, or daily practice, it begins to reveal its strength, its limits, and its consequences. At work, the fading desire for status does not necessarily mean that every capacity has disappeared. Perhaps the ladder no longer compels you, while the craft still holds attention. Perhaps competition has become empty, while mentoring, service, or careful contribution remains meaningful. Before declaring the vocation finished, you might reduce one avoidable obligation, offer guidance to someone less experienced, or undertake a bounded project organized around quality rather than recognition. Notice what follows. Does energy return when the reward changes? Does interest deepen when performance gives way to usefulness? Or does estrangement remain even under more humane conditions? Action supplies information that thought alone cannot. Family life offers another testing ground. Inherited roles such as rescuer or peacemaker may weaken, yet their loss can unsettle everyone who depended upon them. The alternative is not silence or detonation. It may begin with one clear refusal, one request stated without apology, one conversation in which care is no longer confused with taking responsibility for another adult's feelings. A boundary tested respectfully reveals more than a fantasy of escape. It shows which relationships can adapt, where fear takes hold, and what kind of closeness remains possible when self-erasure is withdrawn. Personal discipline must also be examined rather than automatically tightened or discarded. Resistance may signal exhaustion, it may signal fear, or it may expose a routine whose hidden purpose was to secure approval that no longer governs you. Adjust one practice. Change its intensity, timing, or reason. Then observe whether greater presence follows, whether avoidance grows, or whether the body simply needed relief. Discipline that serves an emerging life will often feel different from discipline used to defend an obsolete image, though it may still involve effort and discomfort. These experiments resemble stepping stones that become visible only when weight is placed upon them. From the bank, you cannot know the whole crossing. You discover the next support by stepping carefully, testing what holds, and retaining the ability to return. Courage here is participation before certainty. It is not dramatic self-invention, and it does not disregard consequences. Such participation may bring moments of peace, guidance, healing, or renewed hope, not because discomfort vanishes, but because you are no longer waiting helplessly for a complete identity to arrive. The future becomes legible through repeated acts, carrying both vitality and responsibility. Ask of each experiment, does this make me more present? Does it widen responsibility? Can I continue it without pretending to know who I will become? As these tested choices begin to form a path, the remaining task is not to erase the former self. It is to discover how its genuine strengths can enter a larger life without ruling it. The calendar may still be full. The obligations may still arrive, with the same names, at the same hours, requiring the same practiced responses. Outwardly, little may have changed. But inwardly, the experience is no longer merely evidence that something is wrong with you. It has become a question. What has ceased to deserve unquestioned authority, and what wider truth is asking to be included? The identity that once organized your life need not be condemned. It may have taught you endurance, competence, loyalty, restraint, or care. It may have protected relationships and carried you through conditions you could not otherwise have managed. The problem was never that these capacities existed. The problem arose when one arrangement of them claimed the right to define the whole person. Now the garment that once served you has become restrictive. You have entered the dim interval where old explanations no longer guide every decision. Ordinary care has given that uncertainty a vessel, and modest experiments have offered places to set your weight. These are not separate stages to leave behind. Together they describe how passage becomes possible. Loosen what constricts, remain present in what cannot yet be named, protect the conditions for discernment, and test what appears without demanding a guarantee. No outcome is promised. This interval may lead toward a changed vocation, renewed participation in the life you already have, deeper attention to health or relationship, or a form of living you cannot yet imagine. Sometimes, the transformation is visible. Sometimes, the outer structure remains while its inner center changes. What matters is not whether the result looks dramatic, but whether it allows more of reality to be met without self-betrayal. Integration means becoming able to hold what the former arrangement kept apart: outer duty and inner truth, persona and shadow, grief and possibility, continuity and change. It does not ask one side to disappear. It asks each to surrender its claim to absolute rule. The old self contributes its developed strengths. Neglected qualities gain responsible expression. Care continues. Consequences remain real. So you might quietly name one role whose authority is weakening. Name one form of concrete care that keeps this passage safe. Then notice one reversible action worthy of patient attention, not as proof of who you are becoming, but as a way of learning what carries both honesty and responsibility. You do not need to despise who you were, announce who you will be, or see the entire route ahead. A larger life begins when what was excluded is allowed to belong, and what once ruled learns to serve. The path may remain incomplete. Still, the next honest step can be taken with